All right, let's continue with Chapter 7. Don't forget to take the notes. I want to keep reminding you and submit them as homework. All right, so this is where we left off. Now you need to know the difference between a switch and a router. And I want you to write this down. A switch is the device that connects the devices inside a LAN. So everything has to be connected to a switch. A router is the device that connects the devices that are in different LANs, that takes you outside your LAN. So every local area network, they will default to a gateway to go outside. So I said that purposely, default gateway. That's your router. The router is the one that enables you to connect to the outside world. Without a router, you won't be able to connect to the outside world. That's your default gateway, by the way. All right, firewall. A firewall is like a security guard that permits or denies packets from entering or leaving the LAN. All right, a home wireless router, in addition to connecting the wireless devices to the internet, it usually has 4 wired Ethernet ports and to connect the devices in the wired LAN. So it can act as a firewall by opening or blocking ports. A port identifies what type of data is coming or leaving into the network. So for example, if port 80 is attached to a specific packet, then the packet is an HTTP, a web page packet. All right, but we'll talk about that in the next chapter. To access the router management, that means if you want to go inside the router, set up the security and all the goodies that you need to do, you need to open up a browser and type the default gateway that the router gave you in the URL, and you'll be able to get in there. Once you're in, change the security settings, such as the encryption method. You want to change it to either WPA or WPA2, and make sure that you change the admin password. You know, the defaults usually it's admin. The username is admin and the password admin. At least I know that for a Linksys router. But other routers, for example, the Netgears, they may have different settings. It depends on what type of router you have. All right, I want you to write the word port forwarding. You need to know what that means. When you get in there, you'll be able to either do port forwarding, or sometimes you don't have to do that. But anyway, port forwarding, write this down, can be enabled on a router to allow packets from a specific application, specific protocol to go through. So let's say you're playing a game on the internet and they want you to open up a specific port so that the data can go through the router. Then you can do that through the router itself. But be very careful. Hackers will use open ports to send you, viruses and malwares. All right. DMZ, another thing that you should know. Demilitarized zone is a network outside your LAN that will allow the public access. So if you have, let's say, an e-commerce server or a web server that you want the whole world to use, don't put it inside your LAN, put it outside your LAN in a demilitarized zone. So in case there's an attack, things happen outside and not inside your LAN, right? That's what the DMZ for. All right, so let's talk about setting up a wireless router. We'll talk about these addresses, reserved addresses with the DHCP, the MAC filtering. I think we discussed that. Universal plug and play. You may need to update your router firmware, by the way. So that's a good idea. I won't do it just because, it's available. But if everything is working fine and you don't need the features that it needs, and it's not a security update, so because it creates headaches, it creates problems sometimes. So, but it's always a good idea to update the firmware or any operating system. And of course, remember, backup is what's crucial. This is when you get inside the router. This is a Netgear router, so it all depends on what you're going to do. All right. So, setting up a wireless network. What do? First thing you are going to do is you want to connect your PC to the wired port on the router and turn your PC on. And what you do then, the second step is you execute the command ipconfig, find out what your default gateway is. So you remember we did that. So you typed CMD, and then you typed ipconfig, and you found out my default gateway is 192.168.0.1. So what you do with that is you type in your default gateway address, and on the router, in the URL, and you'll be able to access your network. You'll be able to access the router. So that's port forwarding. We talked about that. Let me just move ahead. Here's setting up a wireless network. Of course, assuming that you have a NIC. Okay, so once you are in there, enter the admin, enter the username and the password. All right. Then you'll be accessing the router inside to manage it. Set up the SSID, which is the network that is going to be displayed. You can change that name. You can actually, we'll talk about that in our different classes, and we'll practice all of this in class on how to set up a secured wireless network. All right. Once complete, you make sure you also set up the encryption method, WA, WPA, or WPA2. Preferably, you want WPA2. And make sure you change the admin password, the one that you use to access the router. Once complete, remove the wire and select the wireless network. Pick up the wireless network that you picked up from here, right? So you choose your network that you want. And once you choose one, they'll be asking you for that encryption key that you typed in to get into the router. So you do that and you type that in. Your PC will remember that. And that's it. You're all set. And make sure you use the ipconfig command to verify the IP that the router is giving you the IP address. Okay? Use the ping command. Ping the default gateway. Make sure you can ping it. All right? So WEP, by the way, is the least secure. WPA is the best. That's what you want to do. Right? Use the IP. There's your SSID, the name of the network. The network key. This is for the netgear, right? So you type in, preferably a passphrase. If you're using WPA2, you should be able to use this. If I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah, it's WPA2. Here's your SSID for new one, and so on. All right. You can disable broadcasting if you want. If you don't want your SSID to be displayed, you can disable it. What else do you need? Radio level, QoS. You can set up the quality of service. Let specific packets to go in if you want them. If you're playing a game, you don't want any delay, so you can set that up on this router. I don't like using the Wi-Fi protected. That's really you have to press a button and you'll given a number to type it in. They give you a chance to do that. You press the button on the router, and with a certain amount of time, you got to be able to get access into the router. So the reason they do that is to enable you to, you have to be close to the router to have access. So no one can be actually breaking into your network. Okay, with troubleshooting network connections, okay, a couple of commands. I want you to write those up. The Nslookup, which stands for namespace lookup or name server lookup, is a command used to test the name resolution problem with the DNS servers by allowing you to request information from the DNS server zone data. A zone is where all the records, the name and the IP addresses lie. All right, the next command is, we'll talk about the ping in a few minutes. Well, let's talk about it since it's up here. The ping command is the one that allows you to check for connection, to see if the device that you're trying to reach, you're connected to. And there's a whole bunch of different, parameters that you could use. You're pinging the 127.0.0.1 is you're pinging the local loop to see if your device can actually be able to encapsulate packets, put them on the wire, and loop it back, wrap that I can be able to unwrap it. All right. The tracer command, well, the ipconfig, we did ipconfig/all is the one that will enable you to see your MAC address in addition to your IP configuration. We talked about the Nslookup. Tracer is the one, write this down, is the command that is useful when you are trying to resolve problem, reaching a destination host such as an FTP site. You need to know, you trace the route. You're trying to find it. Let's say you pinged a specific site and it failed, but you don't know where it failed. So what you do is you use tracer to trace the route, and you know exactly where that failure is. Another command is the net command. The net command connects and or disconnects the computer from a shared resource or can display information about connections. You need the admin rights to execute this command, by the way. What else do you need to know? The netstat also is a good command to use, but we'll use more of these commands when we are doing the ethical hacking course. But for now, write this down as well. The netstat gives you statistics about the network activity that includes several parameters, right? All right, that's it. So that's it for chapter 7. So write what I asked you to write down. And